Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. Of course. Well, good afternoon. Look around the room. Let's look around the room. These are the survivors. These are the survivors. By the afternoon of the last day, we only get about 50% because we believe in exhausting people. I went to a conference once and they had, oh goodness, it was five sessions. They had me speak, I think it was 5 times in one day. And they said, we created this schedule so that you'd be able to rest. And I was curious. So I said, what would the schedule have been like had you not wanted me to rest? Because the thing started at 8 in the morning. They said, well, some start at 6 in the morning. I went, all right, that was their idea of rest. So we're so easy on you guys by, yeah, whatever. You got up at 5? You were in line at 5? Oh, goodness, you win. How many of you were in line at like 6 o'clock or earlier? Oh. In the rain, in the cold? Oh, just extend your hand towards these people. God, give them more than they asked for. Amen, amen. Man, it almost makes you feel guilty for arriving at 9, you know. Well, I always like to read at least 1 or 2 funny things. Several men are in the locker room at a golf club. Cell phone begins to ring on the bench, and a man engages the hands-free speaker function and begins to talk. Everyone else in the room stops to listen. Hello, he said. A woman on the other end said, hi, honey, it's me. Are you at the club? He said, yes. She said, I'm at the shops now, and I found this beautiful leather coat. It's only $2,000. Is it okay if I buy it? He said, sure, go ahead if you like it that much. She said, I also stopped by the Mercedes dealership, and I saw the new models, and I saw one I really liked. He said, well, how much? She said, $200,000. He said, well, okay, but for that price, I want it with all the options. She said, great. And one more thing. I was just talking to Janie, found out that the house I wanted last year is back on the market. They're asking $2.2 million for it. The man said, well, go ahead and offer $2 million. They'll probably take it. And if they don't, and it's really what you want, we can go the extra $200,000. She said, okay, I'll see you later. I love you so much. He responded, bye, I love you too. The man hung up the phone. All the other men in the locker room are staring at him. Their mouths are wide open. He turns and he asked, anyone know who this phone belongs to? The Pope goes to New York. He's picked up at the airport by a limousine. He looks at the beautiful limousine. He says to the driver, you know, I hardly ever get to drive. Would you please let me drive? The driver says, man, I don't think I'm supposed to do that. But the Pope persists. He says, please. The driver finally lets up. He says, all right, I can't really say no to the Pope. The Pope gets behind the wheel, driving down the freeway, enjoying himself a little too much, and catches the attention of a highway patrol officer who promptly pulls him over. The cop walks up to the window, tells him to roll it down. He looks at who's driving. He's startled. He's surprised. He goes back to his car, and he radios the chief. And he says, Chief, I have a problem. He says, what sort of problem? He said, well, you see, I pulled over this guy for driving over the speed limit, but it's someone really important. He said, important like the mayor? He said, no, more important than that. Like the governor? More important than that. Like the president? More. He said, who's more important than the president? Well, he's got the Pope driving for him, so it must be God. All right, well, let's see if there's any others here that really speak to us. We'll do one more. You can handle one more? Yeah. Three more, yeah. You just want the whole sermon to be just jokes, yeah. Someday I may do that, but not today. The guy's 84 years old and he loves to fish. He was sitting in his boat the other day when he heard a voice say, pick me up. He looked around, he couldn't see anyone, thought he was dreaming. When he heard the voice say again, pick me up. He looked, there in the water, floating on top was a frog. The man said, are you talking to me? The frog said, yes, I'm talking to you. Pick me up, kiss me, and I'll turn into the most beautiful woman you have ever seen, and I will become your bride. The man looked at the frog for a short time. He reached over, picked it up carefully, placed it in his shirt pocket. The frog said, are you crazy? Didn't you hear what I said? I said, kiss me, I will become your beautiful bride. He opened his pocket. He looked at the frog and he said, nah, at my age, I'd rather have a talking frog. Oh my. I forgot to grab any products, so trust me, it's all good. Go shopping. All right. Turn to John 15. We're going to start there. We're going to end up going back into the Gospel of Matthew. A recent scientific study discovered that women who add a few extra pounds live longer than the men who mention it. They just keep coming to my mind. It's hard to stop the flow once it starts, you know. This older guy's in a gym. He's working out hard with his trainer. And a beautiful young lady walks into the gym, and he turns to his trainer and he says, what machine should I use to impress her? The trainer looks at him head to toe, back to his head, and he said, try the ATM in the lobby. All right, that's all. No more. No, that's all. There are dimensions in our relationship with God. It doesn't stay static. It evolves, it changes. And case in point would be here in John 15, where Jesus, John 15, verse 15, Jesus addresses this issue. He says, no longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I've called you friends. For all things I heard from my Father, I have made known to you. Look at it again. I do not call you servants. A servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all things I heard from my Father, I've made known to you. Just because we sing a song that says, I am a friend of God, doesn't mean we're a friend of a God. there is an approach that we have to the Lord. There's a relationship that develops, and for all of us, it begins as servants. But there's a huge difference between servants and friends. Servants want to do everything that's on the list. Friends actually serve more than servants do, because friends cover the list and go off into the heart of their friend. The motivation is, what is the value of my friend? A servant will try to accomplish their assignment. Their value system is locked into, I want to be responsible, I want to be faithful. But friends think different. They come from a different place. It's not a place of achievement. It's not a place of accomplishment. A friend is motivated by the heart and the values of another person. There's these multi-dimensional relationships that we develop with God. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is a little bit different than that, but I just wanted to make a distinction, draw attention to the fact that our relationship with the Lord evolves and develops. But it's not because I have served God for 20 years, 50 years. You can be a servant for 50 years and never develop friendship where you value the heartbeat of another. When you're moved by the heart of God, you go beyond the minimum requirements. You're looking into what your friend, in this case, what the Father values. What I actually wanted to talk to you about is remotely connected to this concept, but it actually comes down to the difference between needs and wants. I'll try to draw a comparison in a bit. Needs and wants. I don't know how you were raised, but I remember growing up in the church hearing various leaders, various believers say, God is not interested in your wants, he's interested in taking care of your needs. It's a strange thing, but it actually worked to kill the capacity of every believer, to kill the capacity to dream in the hearts of a believer, because God isn't interested in your wants, he's just interested in your needs. And in this relationship with the Lord, I've been discovering something about him that's so different than I ever thought. Now, I was raised in a good home, so I can't imagine what that challenge is like for someone who suffered abuse or neglect in the home. I was in a good home, and I questioned this. I had a generous and kind father, still have a generous and kind mother. And it was a challenge for me, so I can't imagine what it's like for those who were raised in less fortunate surroundings. But there's this idea of God being interested in your needs and not your wants. And it forces me to come to the recognition that I'm not a child living in an orphanage that's guaranteed 3 meals a day and a coat in the winter and a cot to sleep on at night. I actually have a Father who celebrates my interests, who celebrates who he's made me to be, who celebrates how he's called me to function. One of the beautiful things in this relationship with the Lord is he invites us to ask for whatever we want. In fact, he makes a covenant with us. He will fulfill those desires. But we have to keep in mind that he was the one who taught his 12, you can have whatever you want. And when James and John said, could we call down fire on this city and destroy them? He said no. He will say no to any request we make that undermines our purpose. I heard recently somebody said he will say no to any request we make that undermines our purpose. He's very conscious of what he is shaping us to become, and will not fulfill the desires or dreams that take away from that. Having said that, he looks for opportunity to fulfill the dreams, the desires of those things that are consistent and will actually help in the building blocks of making me who he designed me to be. See, he's interested in me representing him well. He's interested in me being an accurate representation of his heart in the earth. I want you to open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 6, and we're going to look at just a couple fascinating verses, fascinating to me anyway. Matthew 6, and then we'll move into chapter 7. Very interesting combination of scripture here. Matthew 6 is where we have what, at least in America, is often called the Lord's Prayer. It's not a good name for it because in the prayer is a confession of sin, and Jesus didn't have any sin. So it was the prayer that Jesus trained his disciples to pray. So it's the disciples' prayer. But as we read into this, the previous verses before verse 9, which is where the prayer starts, he addresses a few things. And he says in verse 7, when you pray, do not use vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think they will be heard for their many words. Therefore, do not be like them, for your Father knows the things you have need of before you ask. Do not be like the world by the unbeliever and think that by repeating a matter 1,000 times before him, you'll get an answer. Because the Father knows what you have need of before you ask. What would it be like to be a mom or a dad and have your child come to you and they say, winter's coming and I don't have a coat. Would you please buy me a coat before winter comes? And then they come the next day and the next day, and they ask the same thing over and over again. They would only do that if they questioned my commitment as a dad to take care of their what? Their needs. The Father knows what you have need of. So in this particular passage, Jesus is instructing his own. Don't use vain repetition. Don't repeat the prayer over and over and over again, thinking that you can persuade him to take care of your needs because you prayed something 1,000 times. It's not how he functions. Because when I come to my Father with a basic need of life, and I ask him over and over again, it's the prayer of unbelief because I question his character. I question his nature. Sometimes fervent prayer is the prayer of unbelief. Because there's the thought that if I add extra energy to the prayer, I can convince you to take care of this basic need. He goes on in his prayer, give us this day our daily bread. He's not saying don't pray for your needs. He's just saying it's not something you need to labor over. Why? It's because of who he is. The prayer started with our Father. Give us this day our daily bread. And yet, strangely, in the next chapter, chapter 7, he's still talking about prayer. And it's in verse 7. He says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open for you. For everyone who asks receives, he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be open. Ask and it will be given to you. How many of you would agree that's prayer? Ask and it will be given to you. Interestingly, in this verse, the word to ask actually means ask and keep on asking. How many of you see a difference between chapter 7 and chapter 6? Chapter 6. Don't repeat the prayer over and over again. Why? Because you're talking to your Father. He wants us to align with his heart and pray, but to labor over the basic needs of life is actually to question who he is as our Father. It's really the prayer of a servant, not a son. And yet in chapter 7, we are exhorted and commanded to pray and to keep on praying until there's breakthrough. Are you alive, or did you all eat turkey and it drugged you or something? Yeah, you're good? All right. So in chapter 6, it's connected to our basic needs. He said, don't keep repeating the prayer thinking that by repeating it, you've somehow gained favor. He's a father. Come to him as a father. Dad, I'm going to need a coat for winter. Thank you. Amen. Get on with life. But in the next chapter, he says, ask, and don't stop asking. How many of you want to know what he was talking about? If you come to church on Sunday, I'll tell you the answer. Just joking. So he says in verse 7, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. Everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. To him who knocks it will be opened. Now look at this, verse 9. What man is there among you if his son asks for bread, that's a basic need, will he give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, listen carefully, if you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask? What happened here? He just moved in his conversation from talking about the basic needs of life, and he moved us into the dream part of life. The dream part is where you persist in prayer. Why? Because persistence in prayer changes us. Persistence in prayer changes us. I'm an equal opportunity, preacher. I want to give this side a chance. All right. Persistence changes us. It builds a strength. It builds a resolve. It trims away careless prayers. It causes us to refine our focus, our priorities. Sometimes the character trait of determination, of absolute resolve on kingdom values, those things happen in persistence in prayer. We become changed in our ability to live in discipline, to refine our focus, to quiet other appetites down to this one thing we've committed our life to. All these things happen in persistence in prayer. He doesn't withhold answers out of punishment. He withholds answers so they will gain interest. The turkey is wearing off. That's good. He withholds answers. He holds them back till an appropriate time because all the while they are gaining interest. The issue isn't, can God answer in a moment? Of course he can, but will the answer kill me? Honestly, think about it. Why does God discipline us? He disciplines us so the answers don't kill us. Let's just take one simple prayer. Let's say we pray, God, I want everyone I pray for that has cancer to be healed. How many of you think that's God's will? Yes. Amen. It is. It absolutely is his will. There's no cancer in heaven. That prayer is consistent with the prayer on earth as it is in heaven. But what happens if God touches me today and from this point on, everyone I pray for with cancer gets healed? That's wonderful. But I got a problem in about 30 days. In about 30 days, my name is known all over the world. I've got the wealthiest people on the planet flying their private jets to our airport with suitcases full of money. Let's say I cannot be bought. I still have a problem. Every time I say yes to pray for one, because I'm only one person that occupies this much space and has this much energy and this much time, every time I say yes to one, I've said no to 1,000 others. What about the media that praised me one day and then wants to crucify me the next? They go through the trash to find out if there's a late bill, find out if there's a letter. They interview people maybe I went to high school with, or they try to drug. They wouldn't do that. But suddenly they want to interview everybody who has ever known me, and they only want to talk to those who have something negative to say. Why? That's a great mystery to me too. We'll just leave it right there. But here's the point. Is pressure is added to any person's life that carries that kind of a mandate, and yet we ask for it. What happens to the person who can't handle that weight of pressure? Criticism continuously. I remember sitting with Oral Roberts once, and he was talking about every single day the paper where he was at would have something negative to say. Every single day for years. Years. What if your emotional capacity is not developed to a place where you can survive that kind of scrutiny day after day? The criticism, the celebration by some, the absolute rejection by another. You prayed for this person. Why didn't you why didn't you go with me to, my uncle, pray for him at the hospital? Because you only have so much time. Do you get the point? There's pressure on every side. And so the Lord has a greater passion to answer these prayers than we have in having them answered. But he also will withhold from us the measure that would destroy us. Not because he doesn't answer prayer, but because he wants to release glory upon a foundation that is stable and solid. The greater the glory, the greater the blessing that rests on a person's life, the greater the need for a strong foundation. If there can be fractures in my foundation that are never exposed until something very heavy gets on it. Does that make sense? Everything looks perfect. It's beautiful. Look how he lives. Look at his devotion to Christ. Look at the discipline. And all of a sudden, there's a level of opposition that is greater than he's ever faced. Or maybe there's a level of praise that is greater. A book contract with an advance that's in the millions. And all of a sudden, the fractures in the foundation, because of the weightiness of responsibility, they start to be exposed. It's the mercy of God. And yet it's his desire to answer the very thing we prayed for. I personally believe those big prayers that we pray, he starts to answer the moment we pray them. But we don't always recognize answers that come in seed form. We pray for oak trees, he gives us acorns. And we reject acorns because they're not oak trees. He's not the caregiver of an orphanage interested in taking care of the minimum parts of our life. His passion has always been to co-labor with dreamers who in their dreams represent him well. We are not robots that are programmed to spit out the will of God whenever he pushes the right button. We are people made in his image to co-labor with him, to because of him, the offspring of our life, because of our relationship with him, the offspring of our life are dreams that reveal and represent him, reveal his character and represent him well. He's looking for people that actually can think, because these servants don't have to. Servants have a list. Do these 12 things before 5 o'clock today. Friends have access to something else. What moves him? He hasn't commanded me to do this, but I bet this would please him. How many of you are married or have friends that have ever done something very special for you that you never asked for? And it so rocked you when they did that. It's the reason I don't like to give a list out at Christmas. Because I don't want them to buy what's on my list. I want them to think about what I value. My wife's not here. She would say, man, that list would sure help. Are you getting what I'm trying to point to? So here's this. We've been invited into this, this relational journey to learn to see what he's like and to pray according to what he's like so that who he is can be clearly manifested in the earth. There's this incredible prayer in Psalms 67. And I'll take just the two verses for you, first two verses. Here's this prayer. It says, bless me, which I like any prayer that says bless me. I'm into that. Because any person who doesn't pray for blessing actually thinks they have enough to serve all the needs around them. I'm exposed to so much greater need than I have resources for, that I have to pray for God to multiply what he's doing in me, because I want to be fully effective. So here's the prayer again, in case you missed the first part. Bless me and cause your face to shine upon me. Now that shining face, picture a face of a mom or a dad holding an infant. It's the pleasure in their eyes. It's the joy on their face. You know, we say things to a baby that we would never say to another human being. We make noises that cannot be uttered out of that context, or they would lock us up. We make faces we would never dare. We wouldn't even do in the mirror because it would embarrass us to see ourselves making those faces. And yet we do it. Our face lights up, and our words, the pitch of our voice, everything changes when we talk to that little infant. Years ago, I was told, when I was writing the book Face to Face with God, I was told that they had discovered that that parents, caregivers, actually, through their countenance and their voice and their words with an infant, actually activate the joy center of their brain. And they're actually trained in joy through the countenance and words of their parent or caregiver, which tells me why so many Christians don't like joy. Because they've never heard or seen the countenance of a father that actually celebrated them. So here's the prayer anyway. Bless me, cause your face to shine upon me. But here's the deal. That your way would be known in the earth and your salvation to the nations. Okay, now think through this with me. Bless me. Cause your face to shine on me. I want your favor. I want what people see on me to be your favor. Do you remember what Jesus said? Let your light shine before men in such a way that they see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. The whole point is to live in such a way that we draw attention to him. So here's the prayer. Bless me. Cause your face to shine upon me, so that your way would be known on the earth and your salvation to the nations. You ever thought about this? Revival coming through the church being blessed? By blessing, I don't mean I don't mean the accumulation of goods. I don't mean the building of personal empires. I'm talking about that life that reigns. Reigning in life is the biblical phrase in Romans 5. Reigning in life doesn't mean ruling over people. It means reigning in life. It means money doesn't control me. I control it. I'm not governed by relationships, good or bad. I manage them. Everything about my life is to display the lordship of Jesus over me. God bless me. Cause your face to shine on me. That your way would be known in the earth. Let's translate that. That your nature would be seen by you blessing me. They've got to know what you're like. And if your favor and blessing isn't on my life, they have reason to question who you are. So you've got to do something with me that would prove to them who you are and what you're like. I have 10 grandchildren, yay! And Eric, who has been running this conference for us, he has two daughters. And the oldest one, Kennedy, just graduated from high school this last June and is now in college, and just such a wonderful young lady. She was a real basketball star in her early years. She just did so good, and Eric had the privilege of coaching her for a little bit in part of her grade school years. How many of you know what it is when a small school plays a large school? The small school always gets killed. You know, the large school ends up putting their second-tier players in just to try to make it a game. Well, in one of these contests, the large school was playing our school. Eric was coaching the team, and his daughter, let's just say her number was 16. Her name's Kennedy. His daughter was on the team. And this game was absolutely a powerful game for both teams. Both teams played excellent. And the big school was shocked at how well the little school did. And the little school, our school, almost won. But in the last moment, they pulled it out and the big school won. But everybody cheered for the little school because they actually made it a contest. At the end of the game, of course, the coach comes over and congratulate each other. You know, it's a great game, and the people would come up and they would say, you know, it was a great game. You guys played so well. And what happened to him is the coach would come up to him and say, you guys did really good. You put up a real fight. You really, really surprised us. And then they would add, who is number 16, his daughter, and who are her parents? And of course, he did what every reasonable parent would do, you know. I remember when Eric and Brian would play baseball. Baseball was our sport, and they were so good at the game. And I'd be sitting in the stands, and one of them would make a great play, and I would stand up in the stands, and I'd yell out, "Whose son is that?" So the coach came to Eric, and even parents from the opposing team said, "Coach, you guys played a great game. Who is number 16 and who are her parents?" What are you doing that would cause someone to ask, "Who's your father?" What are we doing that would cause someone to say, "How did that happen?" How is it that you could make that kind of a mark in the game of life? Who's your father? So here's this verse. Bless me, cause your face to shine upon me, that your way, your nature would be seen in the earth. And what's the result of that? Salvation to the nations. Do you see the domino effect? The revelation of his nature through his people that carry presence, favor, blessing. Favor, presence, blessing causes the world to know who he is, and revival comes to the nations. It's one of the responsibilities. You and I owe people many things. We owe them the message of the gospel. We owe them an encounter with God. But there's something else we owe them. We owe people a blessed lifestyle that reveals the nature of who is our Father. We owe that. So here we're back to this concept of fathers who are interested in desires. Because see, any robot can answer needs. Any caregiver at the orphanage can make sure that you have food on your plate at tonight's meal. But it's the Father that goes beyond. It's the Father who, in the friendship manner, peers into the heart to see what the interests are. Some of you have heard a couple of these stories before, but they put a mark on my life in unusual ways. I enjoy a lot of different sports. In fact, my son made fun of me this last Sunday about how many hobbies I've had throughout my lifetime. And it's just what sons do. They live to embarrass you, apparently. So I'm teasing. One of the activities I've always enjoyed doing, since 1973, I actually remember when it started, is I love to fly fish. And I don't get to do it as much as I would like, but that's my fault, not anybody else's. I love to fly fish, and I get these catalogs, that reveal what God's will might be for my life. Let's be honest, that's why I look through the magazine. And they always have the fishing rods in the front, and these fishing rods, if you know anything about fly fishing equipment, you can spend $600 to $1,000 for a fishing pole. That's no reel or anything. Then the reel is machined aluminum reels, and I mean, they get up there too. And so I'm turning the pages, just trying to discern when the Lord might speak. I turn through, because I feel like I owe it to him to at least, the company was kind enough to send me the catalog. I owe the Lord an opportunity to speak into my life. That's kind of how I approach it. So I prayerfully go through every page, waiting to hear the voice of the Lord, to see, and so I make it all the way through. Intensely devoted fishermen would want. Like the crystal-leaded goblet with the name of a famous river etched on the side. Stuff like that. A leather couch with trout etched in the back of the cushion. A coffee table with a mounted trout under the glass. These things that one cannot live without. And so I turned through these pages, and I was looking through the pages, looking for the will of God, and I stopped on, I remember it was the right-hand side of the page, and there was 3 items there on the inside column, flasks. Silver flask, because apparently fly fishermen like whiskey or brandy or something to keep them entertained if there's no fishing. A flask is a little curved bottle they put in their back pocket, and when they're bored, they pull it out, take a shot, and stick it back in their pocket and keep fishing. I looked at it because they looked so cool. But then I looked at them, in fact, this is exactly what I did. I looked at them, I thought, man, that really looks nice. And I looked at the price, I thought, I could, this is what's going through my mind. It takes all of 2 seconds, But I looked at it, I thought, well, I could afford it. But I went to ask, but I have no use for it. So I turned the page, I went out through the rest of the catalog, never heard God speak. But you save the catalog because he could still speak tomorrow. That's my philosophy. Is I may have had too hardened a heart to hear him today. But after some inner healing, repentance, he could speak tomorrow. So you hang on to the catalog. So that's my philosophy. So I did. I put the catalog away and went out. Benny, my wife and I ended up in the UK. I think it was a week or 2 weeks later. And we were at this conference and just having a wonderful time, as we always do. We love going there and have so many friends. And at the end of one of the sessions, this lady came up to us, and she had a gift for each of us. And so she gave us gifts, and I said, honey, you first. And so she opens her gift. I forget what it was, to be honest. It was a shoebox, and it had, I don't know, maybe like a picture. It was what you would give to a godly woman. Like a picture frame with the name Jesus on it, or earring with crosses, or, I don't remember what it was now. I wish I did, but it was like good Christian gifts. That's what it was. And so she opened hers, and we thanked her. And then I opened mine, and I opened the box, and there was a flask. A flask sitting there. Now, outwardly, I said, oh, thank you, because it was real cool looking. That is awesome. Thank you so much. In my heart, I'm saying, you're kidding. You are kidding. Do you know how many important things on my list you passed up? I mean, I've got this emergency list. This is like do or die stuff. He skipped over that. I've got the important list. He passed that up. I have the it would be nice list. It's like, if we're in a good mood, we can move to the bonus round. These are things you could add to my life. Underneath that is all the stuff that didn't make the list. And on the bottom of that pile was 15 seconds spent looking at a flask on a fly fishing catalog page. He reaches to the bottom of that pile and he pulls out something to bless me with. Why would you have one of your dear ones spend money for something I will never use? Because that one act reveals more to me about the Father than if he answered what was on the top of my list. Because see, I expect the cancer to be healed. I expect the provision to come. I even expect occasionally some of these dreams to be answered. But to see him take notice of moments spent on the right-hand page, the inside column, looking at the price of items that I could care less if I owned, that he makes a note. And he assigns one of his dear ones. Get this for Bill. Trust me, it'll be good. Years ago, I wanted to go out and pray out by the lake, Whiskeytown Lake. Now, there's no connection in these stories. That's so awesome. They're not related. But maybe they should be. I'm not sure. But I wanted to go out and I wanted to spend time with the Lord. And I thought it'd be so cool. It was a nice sunny day. And just beautiful blue sky. And Whiskeytown Lake, the highway goes right by the lake, and there's pools on the right-hand side that are not connected to the big body, although they're fed by the same body of water. And I used to love to go and just sit. There's these big boulders that you sit on, and you look down at the water, and it's just a beautiful day. I had my Bible, I'm reading, I'm just enjoying life, I'm enjoying Jesus, I'm enjoying what he made. It's just a good day. It's like you can't mess up a day like that. And I was just sitting there enjoying the Lord and praying and just having this time with him. And I noticed these little fish, a little perch, bluegill, was swimming around. And so I picked up a little pebble, I threw it in the water, and the little perch came up and ate it and then spit it out. And that was fun. So I just tormented the fish for a little while. I thought, like, that's my job in life, is to add torment to part of his creation. So I would throw throw these pebbles in, they'd come up and eat it and then spit it out. And I was having so much fun. It's that little dark side there, yeah. And as I'm sitting there enjoying what's happening, and this is back during I love to fish. And so I thought to myself, I wonder if these fish eat bees, because bees have stingers. And I was just trying to think, do they eat the bee and get stung? What happens, And so I think to myself, I wonder if they eat bees. As soon as that thought comes to my mind, a bee comes from this side, flies literally right in front of me, stops flying, drops directly in front of me. It's a suicidal bee. He drops right in front of me. He drops right out of the air, literally drops out of the air. He stops flying, just stops moving his wings, drops into the water. A fish comes up and eats him. And I'm sitting there going, who else is here? Why would he do that? There's been a number of experiences like that that are so, I don't know if this makes sense to you. When it comes to the serious list, that's where I put my attention, because I believe these things are important, and they are. I would never want to discredit that. You've got somebody dying, you've got this crisis, you've got that crisis. They're critically important.
What happened to the fish?
He had a fillet of bee and lived happily ever after. He showed no pain whatsoever. Through a number of experiences, bless you. Through a number of unique and unusual experiences, maybe it's the only way I could learn something that I maybe should have known all along. But it was that if it matters to you, it matters to him. And fear robs us of our capacity to dream. Fear robs us of our ability to dream. And the Lord is not looking for robots. He's looking for friends. He's looking for people who move by his heart, who will actually make decisions from his heart. So I want to pray as we wrap this session up. I want to pray for the Lord to release, first of all, understanding of what he's like as a father. Secondly, that he would reignite in us the capacity to dream. How many of you feel like something happened throughout your life where you really lost the ability to dream well? So it's just a lot of people in the church, and religion does that. Religious institutions, and I don't mean denomination. I mean you can have 5 people in a group, and it's an institution. So it's not pointing a finger at anyone. It's just possible to make rooms that restrict the liberty of the individual to be authentic, honest, and demonstrate who Jesus made them to be. And yet wherever Jesus went, those who followed him started dreaming. Yes. You look at the 12, they start dreaming. The dream didn't show up right. No, they thought they were better than one another. But where did that come from? It came from their experience in their hometowns, seeing miracles. They thought their anointing was greater than the other. He didn't tell them not to dream about being great. He redefined greatness. The whole point is he's given us the capacity to tap his heart and to reveal his heart, not as slaves, but as friends. Not as orphans, but as sons, as daughters. So why don't you stand and we'll pray. I walked into the School of Ministry several years ago. When I walked in the back of the room, the Lord spoke to me pretty clear, and I don't always hear this clear, but this was pretty strong. He said, there's someone here that prayed for $500 this morning. And so I knew what I was supposed to do, so when it was my turn, I stood up front, and I said, is there anyone here you prayed specifically for $500 this morning? And a lady right in the front row, she said, I did. I said, you prayed for $500 exactly this morning? She said, yes, I did. So I pulled a $50 bill out of my pocket. I said, this isn't 500, but there's 500 in the 50. See, there's the oak tree